The great concordium of galactic sovereigns was in session, a grand assembly of the most powerful alien empires in the known universe. Towering holographic displays hovered in the chamber's zero-gravity center, cycling through intelligence reports, battle footage, and intercepted transmissions. The subject of today's hearing, humanity. At the center of the chamber, Supreme Chancellor Zalix of the Vathari Dominion sneered as he observed the latest war footage. His species, the Vathari, prided themselves on their cold efficiency and overwhelming military power. They had crushed hundreds of primitive worlds beneath their heel. The humans, they claimed, would be no different. Zalix gestured toward the footage playing on the display. It showed the aftermath of an orbital bombardment on Ardent Prime, a human colony world. Nothing could have survived. The planet's cities were reduced to molten slag, its defenses annihilated in the first wave of attacks. The Council had already deemed the campaign a victory, yet something was wrong. "Observe," Zalix said, his mandibles clicking in amusement. He activated a secondary display. The screen revealed a transmission sent just days after the bombardment. The message contained only a set of coordinates, leading to a distant star system where another Vathari fleet had mysteriously gone silent. "And what, dear council members," Zalix continued with a mocking tone, "do you think we found? When we arrived, the footage shifted. A Vathari fleet, 6 dreadnoughts, 20 destroyers, and an entire carrier battalion was seen drifting lifeless in space. The ships were intact but completely disabled, their systems fried by an unknown force. There was no sign of a battle, no wreckage, no distress calls, just silence." Zalix's amusement faded. "The humans should have been wiped out," he growled. "And yet they remain. Worse, they strike back without a trace, without a pattern." The council chamber rumbled with murmurs. No species had ever resisted the Vathari this effectively. The very idea was preposterous, and yet reality said otherwise. Then another message arrived, a simple transmission intercepted from the humans, a single line. "You should have finished the job." The council fell into stunned silence. For the first time, the laughter stopped. The Vathari Dominion had ruled the stars for millennia. Their military doctrine was simple: overwhelm, subjugate, and erase resistance. Countless civilizations had crumbled beneath their might, their histories erased, their worlds reshaped. Humanity was supposed to be just another conquest. Yet something was wrong. Across the Galactic Concordium's vast network of surveillance, reports were coming in. Disturbing reports. Entire Vathari fleets were disappearing. No wreckage, no distress calls, no sign of battle, just the cold, empty silence of space. Supreme Chancellor Zalix of the Vathari Dominion had dismissed the first few disappearances as anomalies, the results of human desperation. Perhaps the primates had sacrificed their own ships to take a few of his with them, a pathetic but meaningless effort. But now it was a pattern. The war had begun 3 standard cycles ago, when humanity had refused the Dominion's ultimatum: surrender or be annihilated. In response, the Vathari unleashed a brutal orbital bombardment on Ardent Prime, one of humanity's largest colonies. The destruction had been absolute, or so they had thought. 3 weeks later, an entire Vathari battle group vanished near the gas giant Cygnus 9. No survivors, no signals, just gone. Then a second fleet disappeared near Epsilon Eridani. Then a third. The Galactic Concordium had gathered to discuss the matter, expecting an easy answer. A misunderstanding, a glitch in intelligence reports, a statistical anomaly. Instead, they were faced with the unthinkable. Across the chamber, Grand Strategist Korvac of the Zalari Consortium watched the footage with narrowed eyes. Unlike the Vathari, the Zalari valued cold logic above all else. Korvac had studied humanity from a distance, but he had never considered them a serious threat. They were young, Their technology was primitive compared to the Dominions. They lacked centralized leadership, squabbling among themselves like children. And yet, here they were. They are a fractured species, Korvac murmured, his voice an unsettling hum through his respiratory vents. Yet they fight like a singular mind. How? Zalix scoffed. They do not fight like us, that is for certain. They lack the discipline of the Vathari legions. Their ships are crude, their fleets disorganized. He motioned toward the footage of the destroyed Ardent Prime. We burned their world to the ground. Their resistance should have collapsed. And yet, Korvac countered, your fleets are the ones vanishing. A murmur rippled through the council. No species had ever fought back like this. Most civilizations, when faced with the Vathari war machine, submitted. If they fought conventionally. Large-scale battles, desperate but futile. Humanity was different. They were not fighting wars in the traditional sense. They were fighting ghosts. Zalix clenched his mandibles. This is nothing but cowardice, he spat. They refuse to meet us in battle. They skulk in the dark, using dishonorable tactics. Survival is not dishonor, Chancellor, Korvac mused. It is evolution. He motioned toward the latest intercepted transmission. You should have finished the job. It was not a message of desperation. It was a message of warning. Humanity had not been crushed. They had adapted. And now, the hunters had become the hunted. Across the void of space, their fleets moved unseen. Their soldiers struck like phantoms. They did not face the Dominion head-on. They erased them. Korvac's mind raced. How had the Vathari miscalculated so severely? What had they overlooked? Then a realization struck him like a thunderbolt. They do not fight like an empire, he whispered. They fight like predators. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, the Galactic Concordium realized they might not be dealing with a primitive species at all. Perhaps they had woken something far worse. The Vathari Dominion had fought countless wars, but never like this. Never against an enemy that refused to play by the rules of conquest. Across the Empire's vast star charts, entire fleets were disappearing. Not in battle, not in glorious engagements where the Vathari could prove their superiority, but into the void, leaving nothing behind but empty space and silence. Something was wrong. Supreme Chancellor Zalix watched the reports in growing frustration. Every tactical response, every effort to outmaneuver the humans had failed. The Dominion's generals had assumed the humans would rally their fleets, form defensive lines, and fight for survival like every other species before them. But they hadn't. Instead, they vanished into the darkness of space. The human military did not fight with honor or brute force. They fought like ghosts, like predators. They never struck head-on. They waited. They watched. They learned the enemy's weaknesses before dismantling them from the shadows. The Vathari war machine, built for overwhelming strength, was utterly unprepared for this kind of warfare. They did not know how to fight an enemy. They could not. See, it started with a logistical collapse. At first, the Vathari barely noticed the missing supply freighters. The Dominion's fleets consumed massive amounts of resources, fuel, weapons, maintenance supplies, and the occasional delayed convoy was expected. But the delays turned to disruptions. Disruptions turned to disappearances. Entire supply routes were collapsing. No distress signals, no wreckage, just silent, empty space where there should have been Dominion ships. Zalix ordered fortified convoys, heavily armed battleships escorting the supply vessels. It did nothing. Those ships disappeared. Then came the communications blackouts. Naval bases lost contact with their fleets. Planets lost contact with their governors. Officers assigned to monitor the humans went silent, their last transmissions garbled or filled with static. It was deliberate, systematic. General Raxon of the Vathari War Council was one of the few who saw the true threat. He was old, scarred from wars, long before humanity had even left their home system. Unlike his superiors, he had come to respect the humans, not for their strength, but for their adaptability. "They fight differently," he growled at Zalix. "You cannot break them as you did the others," Zalix hissed in irritation. "Then we burn their homeworld," he spat. "We end this in one swift strike." Raxon's mandibles twitched. "And what if we fail?" Silence. That was the question. None of them wanted to answer. The second mistake came when Zalix ordered a show of force. The Dominion sent 5 entire battle fleets to the warfront, a massive show of overwhelming firepower meant to intimidate the humans into surrender. It was the largest fleet movement in Dominion history. That's when the disappearances accelerated. Within days, one of those fleets vanished, the entire 357th Armada gone without a trace. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, not a single distress call. Then, the 389th Armada suffered the same fate. Panic rippled through the War Council. Something was hunting them. The breaking point came when the Vathari Command lost contact with Outpost Kivax, a key supply station in the Orion sector. The outpost was a massive orbital station, housing thousands of Vathari officers, soldiers, and engineers. When Zalix ordered a fleet to investigate, what they found defied all logic. The station was still there, untouched. No signs of battle, no breaches in the hull, but inside it was empty. Every single Vathari officer, soldier, and worker gone. No blood, no bodies, no signs of forced entry. Just silence. A single message had been left behind, written in crude Vathari script, smeared across the walls. "We are still here." The Galactic Concordium was watching. The other alien empires, once amused by the humans, were now silent observers. Korvac, the Zalari strategist, studied the latest intelligence reports in awe. Humans were not the strongest species. Their technology was not the most advanced. Their empire was barely even an empire. But they adapted. Every war the Vathari had fought was against species that behaved predictably. They resisted. They fought. They surrendered. Not humanity. Humanity did not surrender. They did not fight wars for territory or conquest. They fought to win. The humans had learned the Vathari's tactics. They had studied their formations, their weaknesses, and they had used that knowledge to strike without warning, without mercy. They fought like predators. Korvac's eyes widened as he read one final intercepted human message. A single phrase: "You called us prey. That was your first mistake." For the first time in its history, the Vathari Dominion felt something it had never known before: fear. The Vathari Dominion was collapsing. Their once mighty war machine, built on overwhelming force and domination, was crumbling from within. Not from direct conflict, but from something far worse. Fear. Supreme Chancellor Zalix watched from the bridge of the Dominion's flagship, the dreadnought Karzir, as his final remaining fleet assembled over Vathar Prime, the heart of the EE Empire. The endless black of space was illuminated by thousands of warships, what remained of the once mighty Vathari Armada. Zalix had summoned every surviving warship, every last fighter, every battleship still capable of combat. The humans were coming. For weeks, the Dominion's greatest fleets had vanished without a trace. The humans had never engaged in direct warfare. They had struck from the shadows, picking off outposts, destroying supply lines, and turning the Empire against itself. Now, Zalix's forces were starved, cut off, demoralized. But this time, the humans would have no shadows to hide in. They would face the Dominion's full power. The Vathari fleet waited. Their weapons were primed. Their warriors stood ready. This would be the final battle. Then the transmission came. It was human. A direct broadcast across all Dominion channels. A voice, clear and calm, echoed through every Vathari warship. "You thought we were prey. You thought we would break. Zalix clenched his mandibles in rage. You don't understand us. You never did. Then, silence, no battle fleets, no human warships appearing on sensors. The Vathari waited. 5 minutes. 10. Nothing. Then, the alarm screamed. The Dominion's planetary defense systems shut down. The orbital stations went dark. Their fleet's communications collapsed. Panic spread like wildfire. Zalix's officers scrambled at their consoles, trying to restore control, but it was too late. The humans were already inside their systems, and then they arrived. Out of the darkness, from the shadow of Vathar Prime's largest moon, the human fleet emerged. They had been there the entire time, waiting, watching, learning. Hundreds of human warships, silent predators in the void, unleashed their attack. Zalix could do nothing but watch in horror as the human assault unfolded. With terrifying precision, the humans didn't charge in blindly. They didn't engage in a head-on battle. They hunted. Human stealth ships disabled key battleships first, severing the Dominion's command structure. Sabotaged warships turned on their own fleets, their targeting systems hijacked. Boarding teams breached the Vathari dreadnoughts, taking the fight inside. Zalix watched, powerless, as his empire's greatest fleet was dismantled before his very eyes. On the bridge of the Khazir, Zalix finally understood. This was not war. This was extermination. The humans had never fought for conquest or territory. They had fought for vengeance. The Vathari had made a mistake. They thought the humans would bow like the others. They thought they could crush them with overwhelming force. Instead, they had forged something far worse. They had created a predator. A final transmission came through, direct to Zalix's personal channel, a human voice. You should have finished the job. Before Zalix could react, the Khazir's reactor detonated. The flagship of the Dominion, the heart of its power, obliterated in a blinding explosion. Across the system, the Vathari fleet burned. The Dominion was over. And the humans? They didn't conquer. They disappeared. Vanishing back into the darkness from which they had come, the Vathari Dominion was no more. For the first time in thousands of cycles, the predators had become the prey. The once mighty empire, feared across the stars, had vanished overnight. No grand battles, no drawn-out war. The humans had erased them, one piece at a time, until nothing remained. Across the galactic network, silence followed. The Galactic Concordium had watched in disbelief as the Dominion, one of the most powerful, ruling factions in the known universe, ceased to exist. No distress calls had been answered. No survivors had emerged. There was nothing left. Worlds once ruled by the Vathari found themselves suddenly leaderless. Entire colonies awoke to discover their oppressors had simply disappeared. Their war fleets, their orbital stations, their leaders gone. The Galactic Concordium convened in emergency session. For centuries, the Council had dismissed humans as a primitive, inconsequential species, a people too young, too reckless to be a true galactic power. But now, they spoke of humanity in hushed, cautious tones. The Vathari had once mocked the humans. They had laughed. Now no one was laughing. Grand Strategist Korvac of the Zalari Consortium stood before the Council, reading the final reports with a cold, analytical mind. The Zalari had prided themselves on their logic, their ability to predict the outcomes of wars before they even began. But they had never predicted this. The humans are not like us, Korvac stated, his voice heavy with realization. They do not fight for conquest. They do not seek power. He paused, glancing around at the assembled representatives of the remaining empires. We assumed their technology was primitive, that their fractured governments made them weak. He turned back to the holographic display, showing the remains of the Vathari homeworld, now a graveyard of silent warships. But we failed to understand the truth. He looked at the Council, his next words sending a chill through the chamber. They are not weak. They are survivors. A long silence stretched across the chamber. No one dared to speak. The humans had not conquered the Vathari. They had not claimed their territory, nor had they issued demands. They had simply left, like a storm passing through the void. Like a shadow that had no need to linger, it was as if humanity had simply erased an enemy that had dared to wrong them. And then they disappeared. The last intercepted transmission from humanity appeared on the display, a simple phrase: "We do not start wars, we end them. No threats, no boasts." A warning. And across the galaxy, for the first time in history, the other empires understood. Humanity was not just another species. They were something else entirely, and from that day forward, no one dared to make the same mistake the Vathari had.